Here's the man. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he's had a shave. It's VE Day. The great, the wonderful, the one and only, the late Umahro. Can you hear? Let's unmute, yeah.
I think should be connected now.
Yeah, we good?
Yeah, and my sound's going through as well?
Yeah, nice and clear. Excellent.
All right, great.
So your timekeeping, being atrocious, has worked out well because I had it all set up in the back garden. I don't know if you're aware, but as you know, I always wear Union Jack, Union flag.
Yeah.
But today's a big day, and I guess it is all over Europe, but certainly in Britain and America is going to be the same VE Day. And we're supposed to be having a party on the porch due to the lockdown. We'll obviously talk to you about the lockdown. But none of my neighbours are playing, so I've been out this morning for an hour and a half power walking around with the flag that's behind me, up to toe in Union Jack. Unfortunately, all made of nylon and polyester, very 1970s. So I've had a shower since I got back because it was pretty horrendous. And I thought, you know what would be nice? We'll do it from outside in the garden. And I tried to log in, waiting for yourself, and he says, "I'll just be a few minutes." And just as I logged out to restart, the neighbour decides it's a lovely day. I'll mow my lawn next door. So we've set up again inside. So I just want to make sure the sound's clear and stuff. And I want to say, obviously, on a special day for us, and we'll see, get into all sorts of conversation with yourself about whatever you want to talk about. So, but I want to say thanks for joining me because I know what a busy man you are, and getting hold of you at any time is pretty horrendous. So maybe coronavirus is working in our favour. That you are a little less busy, at least jetting all over the place. I'm sure you still got a lot on, video calls and podcasts and webinars, because we'll get into that. So guess what I found? I was just setting up and I thought, you know what, when I introduce him, which I let people introduce themselves, but I always give a big up. Most of my students know I've probably got a bit of a man crush on you. So I'm a little boy, calls you the boss. So Oscar says hello. I told him I was speaking to the boss today. So he's with his mum today. They're doing bunting in the garden, and they're doing jam sandwich, egg and mayonnaise and cress sandwiches, Victoria sponge, cherry bakewell. She's pretending they're for him. I've got a sneaky suspicion they're less for him, but there you go. I told him I was speaking to you, so he said, "Can I watch your recording, Daddy?" So we better give him a mention. But look what I found.
Oh,
remember this?
Oh yes, back in the day. That's
2004 when we worked on the research on the Udo's oil and had some good talks. Manchester, Birmingham, University down in London. So this was recorded at one, and I still give this to my students. And they go, "Oh, you used to have a physique." Well, thank you very much. Amari used to have hair a long time ago, big blonde, spiky, modelly hair, but we won't talk about that.
No. Well, we both still have a physique. It's just like, they settle, so they move from up here and they kind of move down. I mean, if you were to do total circumference, if you were to measure circumference everywhere, it would be no different now from back then.
About the same, it's differently distributed.
Yeah.
And it's a bit
slightly different
squidgier when you push it.
And it's like, it's all center mass now. It's all, right around the middle. That's where you have most of it.
Oh, but you remember,
the total numbers are the same.
When I've done courses with you, I've heard you leaping around in the middle of the night and early in the morning doing exercise with heavy breathing. At least that's what you tell me you were doing.
Yes.
I was disappointed when you told me you were doing HIIT training. I was like, "Go on, son."
Well, I mean, any kind of movement is exercise.
This is true. So,
alone or with someone. So.
Well, I'm alone. I've been alone for a while now, but I'm definitely alone in isolation. So give me a bit of background. And this, obviously, and the people that have met you know how outstanding you are. It always makes me smile. People that have questioned how much I've bigged you up when they've come to the masterclasses. I remember one GP in particular, who's a good friend of mine. We've stayed in touch throughout this. He's obviously working remotely. He's got a GP practice. And he has done now, just this week, started doing some remote, training sessions. So I'm in the garden, putting him through his paces. But he was like, "Well, what's this guy's background? What's his academic? What's his PhD? What's his doctorate? What's this?" And I was like, "Just come in the room and see." And I remember halfway through the first day, he pulled me aside on lunch. He was like, "Wow." So this could take all day, but
I'll make it short.
Give us a background on you, sir, because it's a phenomenal story. I mean, it really is.
Yeah. So these days, and for the last 20 years or so now, I worked in this, area where nutrition, health, physiology, biochemistry, cooking, endocrinology, microbiology all come together. So my basic mission in life is to help as many people as possible, obtain as much health, vitality, well-being, and energy as they deserve, ideally to stay that way all the time, or if you become ill, finding out what you can do yourself to become healthy again, or at least feel a whole lot better. And retrospectively, it's no wonder I've ended up working with this, because even as a child, even as a baby, I was really into food. So 8 months old, had no language, had maybe half a tooth protruding in my, somewhere in my mouth, and I started demanding my parents' food. I didn't just want mother's milk, mashed vegetables, and porridge. I wanted their chicken drumsticks and things like that. Obviously, couldn't chew them with half a tooth, being a baby, but still wanted their food. And I tried making my first omelet before the age of 3. Didn't manage to do so because my parents heard what was happening in the kitchen, stopped me before I burned down the house. Right. And then I'm Danish, but obviously my skin's a bit darker than the average Dane, and it's not just spray tan and tanning booths. So that's my mother. She's archetypical Scandinavian, blonde, blue eyes, thinks of the sun looks like a tomato before she's finished the thought. But my father's from Barbados, hence the name Umahro.
And hence why you Barbados when you go to nightclubs.
Exactly. Yeah, we can get to that story later. So right. So I've also, in terms of food, I mean, I've obviously not just had Danish food from an early age, but also lots of Caribbean food, which is a bit more diverse than Danish food, lovely as it is. And then I've also been into biology and living organisms from an early age. So I guess as a kid, before I could read, I had forced all the grown-ups or anyone old enough to be able to read books about nature and animals and so forth. And at the age of 5 or 6, I found a dead mouse, and I thought, oh, dissection time. So I got into my grandfather's shed, pinned the mouse with legs and apart in every single direction, got hold of a knife and started trying to dissect it, made quite a mess. And then I thought I'd look at the brain, got hold of a hammer and a chisel, unfortunately applied a bit too much force, and the whole head exploded straight. Exactly. And I was there, head on top of the mouse, open mouth, like, oh, this is exciting, boom. So I had plenty of not just skull fragments, but semi-fermented mouse brain going straight into my mouth. And although all this fermented food's good for you, I'd suggest no need for fermented mouse brain. There are better ways of getting your probiotic microbes and so forth. So this interest has been there from very early. And then as a teenager, I lived in the Far East. My parents were stationed by the Danish Foreign Ministry initially, and then worked for Novo Nordisk. So I lived in Beijing and Hong Kong from 89 until 95. And during that time, I actually studied enough biology and biochemistry on my own to cover what would be more or less the equivalent most of a bachelor in human biochemistry. So at that point, I didn't think I'd end up working here. I thought maybe I'd go on to be a pro basketball player. Pretty crazy. I'm 6'1", 186, which that was a good basketball player, but that's tiny. But especially nowadays, and back then, it was 25 years ago or so, 30 years ago. And I thought, do all sorts of other things. And then in 1995, I got back to Denmark, thought I'd have a sabbatical year. I was actually supposed to go either to Oxford to study or School of Oriental and African Studies. But during that year, I became severely ill. So I developed inflammatory bowel disease, something in between reactive arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. And I got lots of neurological inflammation that was finally diagnosed as atypical MS, because the symptoms fit. Some of the clinical features fit, some of them didn't, but in terms of symptoms and so forth. And I also started moving towards autoimmune hepatitis. I lost 40 kilograms within a year. So I went from about 100 kilograms, which has been my weight plus minus a few kilograms, depending time of year, got down to less than 60 kilograms within a year. And also I was extremely tired. So I could have chronic fatigue syndrome diagnosis could also have been made at the time. And I had pain all over, not just in my joints or I had neurological pain or in my hepatic area or around my intestines, but everywhere. So I also fit, a fibromyalgia diagnosis. And this is back in the mid-90s. So medically, like, okay, if we treat your inflammatory bowel disease, that's not going to be good in terms of your autoimmune hepatitis, what we have for the MS, which atypical, interference, which obviously are not a good idea of other autoimmune diseases. So in the official healthcare system, no one really dared treat me. And this is not, I'm not angry about it, because what are you going to do? A healthy, relatively healthy young bloke, no family history, all these things going on. So, I'd get into the hospital, I'd be discharged again, and obviously I was just at home because I was in such a poor state. And every single time, I'd be discharged with the words, come back when you feel worse, because then we can remove your intestines and give you a colostomy, or if you can't walk anymore, okay, then we'll put you in a wheelchair with these MS-like symptoms and so forth. And eventually, right after my 20th birthday, I thought, no more. Because next time I go back to the hospital, I'll enter in an ambulance, leave in a coffin. There must be something I can do on my own. And obviously, at that time, I already knew that broccoli is healthier than, Cadbury's, dairy chocolate, whatever. And I had been quite well.
1 mile from my home, by the way. And
oh, well.
Never been the same since they sold it to the Americans. No, it probably wasn't the best chocolate, but it went down.
No.
The Americans bought it, so.
Yeah, well, they should just go for really dark chocolate, but that's another story. So I had been really healthy compared to many of my friends at that age, my late teen years, my early 20s. But I thought, okay, there must be something where food can become literally individualized medicine. And I had everything to win, nothing to lose, and that's where all this interest I'd had, all of a sudden it made sense, because I had enough understanding of my body and physiology and biochemistry to literally begin mapping my biology and saying, okay, this disease, these things are off, these things are probably happening at the cellular level, molecular level. What can I do to tweak those things, get things back where they should be? And so I started with that knowledge and changing my diet, using nutrition, and then I found experts all over, both Denmark and abroad. And little by little, I managed to put together the puzzle and find the missing pieces. And by radically transforming my diet, despite not being extremely unhealthy in the first place, and also using nutrients at pharmacological doses and using medicine judiciously, once I really had a good grasp of biology and biochemistry, I managed to get back on my feet. So by my mid-20s, I no longer was ill. I still didn't feel really with lots of energy, but no longer really fit those diagnoses. And by my 30s, early 30s or so, which is quite a while ago now, I'd say that's when I was really completely back on my feet, able to train again at will and so forth. And so that's how I've ended up working. I literally stumbled upon functional medicine without knowing what functional medicine was until I went to the IFM, one of the conferences in the mid 2000s, or it's in some ways it's biohacking, not for optimization of living until 120, but for getting your individualized, getting your biology back on track. And so that's what I've worked with ever since. So I have a clinic where I see people one-to-one, everything from elite athletes who want help with how to win without using EPO and other things, or beat the people who use EPO, at least give them a run for their money, to people who are really ill. I've written a lot of books, none are out in English yet, but hopefully.
Yeah, we talked about this year.
I know.
The doctor asked me, must have been just before we went on lockdown, which we'll get to, but he said, what's happening with these books? He wants the books. So this is the guy that came into that room to meet you, and we did. And I'm going to bring this up because I've got them sat right here. Part of my job is going to be Sunday now, because I've got a busy day today, being everything GB. Doing scones on the or scones, if we're going to say it right, on the front. And I've got Oscar tomorrow, but got to interpret Dutch test and GI map. And I would just say, I remember when I insisted when you came over that we did the GI map, and you were like, no, we've got this, we do GIFX. And I was like, oh, I like the GI map. And lo and behold, years later, Nordic are doing the GI map. So I'm just saying, I mentioned it first. But you are a phenomenal teacher and a friend and a mentor. But when, we've got very similar off-the-cuff teaching style interaction. But what blows people away is the complexity of what you go into, that you bring it down to a level where people understand. I mean, I think it was the last one we did the GI, and we did inflammation and immunity, if I remember right, the whole weekend. And we make it a big thing. The food was laid on and everyone was social. But we had people coming from Denmark, which amazed me, since you're from Denmark. They travelled from Denmark. Great. We had people from Norway, people from functional medicine guy, doctor from Portugal. We had GPs. some of them, you know, obviously the ones traveling from Europe were on your reputation. Others were like, who's this guy? Others had seen you when you taught the DNA. One of the interviews I've just done, a guy's recently done the DNA testing interpretation training with you in London. And you know, it's the diversity of your knowledge, which is amazing, and you know, something I try and aspire to. But yeah, I'm still following the very principles that you taught me. So we need to get you back over here, pal. We need to sneak you on a military plane or something while you've got.
Well, I mean, now we have like two obstacles. At the moment, there's travel lockdown, and then, you know, next time I might need a visa or something like that to be allowed into the country. Although maybe I can make some sort of claim that talk about, you know, I'll get really annoyed with like the Windrush scandal, because my father's Bajan. he lived in London for a while. He lives in Denmark now. He says dual Danish Bajan citizenship. But then also, you know, I have other family members.
You've got family everywhere.
I actually caught. No, but in the UK who are, you know, who are actually caught in the Windrush scandal, who are in this limbo. So maybe I'll say, either give me a visa or I'm going to, you know, raise hell on social media. Although I might not have that much following, but we'll see. But
I don't know.
Anyway, but thank you anyway for those. For those words, but you know, but that's how I've ended up working with what I do. I haven't done the traditional way, but I'd say by, you know, being sort of trained in the battlefield initially with myself and having a lot of knowledge and having to learn things, I have a very good grasp of these things. So also I lecture, I do research. So right now I'm part of a research collaboration between several Danish universities, the Danish Multiple Sclerosis Foundation and Stony Brook University in New York. So at Aalborg University, they found some interesting changes in energy metabolism in neurons across the board in all these neurodegenerative diseases, MS, ALS, Parkinson's, and so forth. Right. And that change caused a shift from, you know, glucose metabolism to fat metabolism, which for neurons is a complete disaster. Right. And at least with candidate pharmaceutical agents, if we can knock that back, literally force the neurons to use glucose again, we can ameliorate a lot of these things in animal models. So far, we haven't done human clinical trials, but then they thought there must be a dietary component. Obviously, we know that what you eat and nutritional components and metabolic status and so forth has big impact on what happens in other parts of the body. So why not in the brain? So now we're trying, you know, if we can get the funding to do studies where we'll try different diets to see how they influence MS symptoms. And, you know, there are a couple of diets out there that are used: the Wald's diet, the Swank diet, the George Jellinek overcoming MS diet. So we looked at those, and some of the, you know, some of the things that they have in common, some of the things where they're different, but some of the things they have in common actually align right with what we see at the cellular level, with that might address some of these changes, enforced switch from glucose metabolism to fat metabolism. So now I do work like that as well, and I do a lot of lecturing, and then I've hosted a TV show in Denmark that's quite similar to Dr. Chatterjee's Is There a Doctor in the House on the BBC. Okay. We didn't do a rip-off, it was Parallel Evolution, because we actually it was less more than 10 years before when we did the initial work to get the TV show going. But things just take decades in TV before they come to fruition, if they come to fruition. So yeah, but anyway, so yeah, and then we met. That's quite a while ago. It must be. I mean, it's in the 2000s. So
2004.
Soon it'll be like 2004. So soon it'll be like a 20th anniversary.
Yeah, well, I have to. That might be the first time we can have a cuddle, a man hug.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. By then, social distancing restrictions should have been, you know, just easy enough that we could do that without getting in trouble.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, that was the work on the Udos, and obviously there's a lot of people. I mean, you did a lot more work with Udo Rasmussen than I did directly, but we both worked on the oil. You were doing a lot with the European athletes. I worked with some elite athletes in the UK and ran bloods and ECGs and everything. Yeah. But he was obviously, you know, he had toxicity issues which got him into it. So it's fascinating when people move into it for a passion or almost their survival, as you did. the driving force of that is phenomenal. Interesting what you were just saying there, where you work on neurodegeneration, because I've got somebody else who's just doing some of the DNA tests, Nordic, and as you know, I've had you over a number of times. So I studied with you, having done a very bad course with a UK company that I know you know about, but we did the 4 days with you, which was just outside of London, and then you've been in Birmingham, and I think ran 2. But the DNA Mind one that came out fairly recently, it's one of the more recent, a while ago, I found that fascinating because sure, you know, I do a lot of work with veterans, but I'm moving into, in fact, this morning I've been teaching first aid for mental health, but being an NLP practitioner and then looking at nutrigenomics, I find the DNA Mind so fascinating. I'd love to come over, and I want to see you teach it, you know, because I just respect your depth, diversity of knowledge. So that's definitely one. I'm getting people to ask, asking me, sorry, about when you can come over, and obviously then poops at the fan, but you're just always so busy, man. You need to get your foot off the gas, and then you're, you know, getting all loved up and swanning all over the world. So I've got no chance of getting hold of you.
No, well, I mean, if we plan ahead of time, then we can certainly.
So what's happening? You know, to give people an insight, because there's a gentleman I know. You met him, if you remember, a young lad, Adam. He came on one of the masterclasses, friend of mine from Scotland. Did my courses, and then he's done a 4-year honours degree in nutrition and dietetics. He has been working in about hospitality, but he's got stuck in Thailand. And it's amazing how many people, when I tell them, you know, a friend of mine's been in Thailand, he went for a 2-week holiday and a wedding. He's been there 7 weeks. No hope of getting back for at least a month, possibly more. And they're like, oh, but it's paradise. It's not paradise. They're on full lockdown. You can't buy alcohol. You can't leave the house. If you do, you have to wear a mask or massive fine. They're doing door-to-door random checks for temperature, which is brilliant. I mean, they're thorough. How is it in Copenhagen?
Well, in Denmark, we're doing quite well, everything taken into consideration. So the total number known, of course, there's a shadow, you know, there's some people who haven't diagnosed, but the total number of people diagnosed with COVID-19 is in the low thousands, and we have less than 1,000 deaths. Of course, then there's, again, you can talk about death because they die from COVID-19, they die with it, and might have died from, you know, basic pneumonia. But you know, but if we sort of don't spend time on that, we've done quite well. But it's also been with some pretty aggressive lockdown, not China, Wuhan style, but I mean, everything got closed down. You know, literally schools, everything. People were, I mean, for the whole time, people have been allowed to go shop for groceries and things like that. Not like Spain, where you could go once a week, or Italy, parts of Italy where you can go once a week, you know, so that hasn't been that bad. But restaurants, bars, cinemas, fitness centers, everything was closed down for a while, except for, you know, obviously hospitals weren't, but anything non-essential was closed down. GPs for a while were also closed down, except for acute, you know, medical management. And so it's definitely, it's hurt the Danish economy. You know, we're looking at, we don't know yet, but I suspect we probably might lose at least 5% BNP this year, maybe more. And we don't know the long-term solution. And there have been aid packages set by the government, but they haven't been adequate. But I'm not sure how as a government, how do you make an adequate aid package in a situation like this, where, you know, no one's expecting it, prepared for it. And so I think, all in all, we're doing quite well in Denmark compared to other countries. We don't have the same infection rate, disease rate, death rate, and then Denmark being, for all means and purposes, a relatively wealthy country. We can, I mean, it's not that it's irrelevant or insignificant, but probably compared to some other countries, Denmark is in a better position to handle the you know, the financial cost of what's been done and what will be done. But I think what happened in Denmark is we were too slow initially to stop initial spread, because it seems a lot of what probably was the main vector into Denmark actually happened to be through Austria and northern Italy, because people in February went you know, skiing, and that's where we had, you know, lots of people getting ill, and then and all things were already out in the open. Then you say, oh, but Italy, northern Italy, and there's a lot of infection there, and Ischl in Austria and so forth, and then the Danish lawyers are like, yeah, no, but it's not going to come to damage, it's not going to be an issue. And people like, shouldn't we quarantine people when they come in from those locations, test them, trace, do contact tracing. No, not a nation. Then all of a sudden, now we got, so now it's spread all over. So in an ideal world, we would have done, Denmark and many other countries should have done like Taiwan or South Korea or Japan, where as soon as we knew something was going on, it's like, okay, people who enter from points of potential infection or just, people who might be asymptomatic carriers, stop them, test them, quarantine them until you know that they're not infectious or when they become ill or just spread the disease, do contact tracing and minimize, because that definitely would have resulted in not needing as aggressive lockdown. And therefore it wouldn't have hurt the economy as much. But we are where we are, and obviously some of these countries were probably much better prepared because they had direct brunt of SARS and MERS, which in outside of Middle East, obviously MERS or SARS outside of the Far East, right? Then people were like, yeah, theoretically we understand it, but we've never seen it. And we thought, and initially people thought, okay, these types of pandemics, they're so virulent that they won't really spread widely. I mean, that's the problem with SARS-CoV-2. It's right in between. I mean, it's a problem, at least if you get it, at least if you're weakened already or if you're unhealthy. But it's not as deadly as SARS or MERS, where you had, people got really ill no matter what, and you had death rates, I think 10% for SARS, 30% for MERS, and therefore it becomes self-limiting, right? But here, it's not that bad, and people can carry it for a long time before they develop symptoms and spread it to a lot of people who might also not get very ill, but then the moment you hit someone who's already in a bad state, right? And that's, I mean, because that's what I'm beginning to argue in the Danish press, is that we have BNP or GNP, it's called gross national product, right? In English and Danish it's BNP, but then same thing. Why don't we have GNH, if you were saying gross national health? Why don't we have a key performance indicator at national level that's about health? I'm not sure how to put it together, but I think this is the time where if we're willing to make these major changes to prevent people from dying or getting infected with SARS-CoV-2, getting COVID-19, and also we are willing, we're saying we don't want the healthcare system to be overrun because there's not enough capacity to handle the people who are normally in the healthcare system, chronic disease, acute disease, lifestyle diseases, consequences of aging, and then having a massive, spike in people who become ill to the point they need treatment or might need to go on a ventilator, and have assisted breathing. We don't have enough capacity for that. So in other words, if we were to focus on GNH, gross national health, and say, what if we now had the courage to make the changes in society, in food availability, in how we promote healthy behavior, to lower the number of people who are obese, because we know obesity seems to be a big risk factor, both for infection, but especially for getting severely ill if you get infected.
Like diabetes and stuff that goes with it.
And diabetes as well. And for diabetes, it seems, regardless of body fat, because you're going to be generally type 2 diabetes associated with obesity, but you can actually be quite slim and not even be skinny fat and still have it. So that's an issue. We know high blood pressure is associated with an issue, right? So if we just start thinking about how many people suffer from hypertension, how many people are not just a bit overweight, there's like cosmetic overweight where people say, oh, I'm a bit too chubby, or I'd like to look more fit, when you hit the 40s and things start moving down south, say, oh, why can't I be like back in my 20s? Well, I was pointing at myself, and fortunately, people can only see from chest up here, so they exactly. Yeah, I mean, right. So what would happen if we had the courage at national level, at international level, at societal level, to make the changes in food availability, in how food eating behavior is affected by the whole environment we're in, by promoting more movement, fitness, making it more accessible, making it and also not just preaching to the choir, but also helping a lot of people who are not very healthy, usually not by choice, to change the environment or the resources available to those people, what inspires them. to actually enable them to be healthier. Because, I mean, we would win, it would be like exponential gains, right? We would lower the rate of chronic disease associated with lifestyle. So that would save money on its own if we're just looking at money, finances, but also just think about all the people, because the burden of dealing with a lifestyle disease, I mean, that's significant in terms of quality of life, a shorter life, worries, you know, so one thing's like, if you look at from a pure financial point of view, but at the human, you know, from a human perspective, just think about how much suffering and slow, uncomfortable suffering we could ameliorate. So that would be, we would win on that. And then we'd have enough capacity in the healthcare system that if something comes with a pandemic, because this is probably not going to be the last one, right? That we actually would have enough resource capacity to handle bottleneck surges, right? So I think, you know, one of the things also to consider from this is in Denmark, 17,000 people die every year from smoking.
Right.
And then we have all the people who aren't dead yet, or who might not die, but still will be impacted by smoking, with anything from severe disease to things that might be mild, at least on the spectrum of what you handle within the Danish NHS, right? So, and we have less than 1,000 people who died from COVID-19. So if we're willing to do things that cost 5-10% of gross national product this year to be at that level, as opposed to getting to North Italy, you know, like northern Italy or parts of Spain or New York and so forth. Why in the world aren't we willing to do what it takes and what's necessary to make sure that it's a whole lot less than 17,000 people a year who die from smoking? Or why aren't we willing to do at societal level what it takes to make sure, I know in Denmark it's about 16-17% of the population are obese, 51% are overweight, but a bit overweight might not be much of an issue, right? If you're metabolically healthy and physically active, and health and weight or body fat's not the only parameter, because you can be normal weight and not skinny fat and still be metabolically quite unhealthy. But I mean, there's an association. Why aren't we willing to do that? Because the measures necessary to do that wouldn't cost in terms of gross national product or, you know, in the private sector in turnover. I mean, this can be done in a way that would actually save money at public level, at governmental level, at national health services level, and make people healthier. And then if there's another pandemic that comes along, we'd have enough capacity to deal with it. So we wouldn't need to do things where, you know, like chop off a foot because you've been bitten by a cobra. We'll make sure you don't get bitten by the cobra in the first place, or have you know, have the antidote readily available, you know. So you know, and also, I mean, think about the people who are already quite unhealthy. And when I'm saying quite unhealthy, I'm not saying by their choice. So there's no shaming or judgment in this, but you know, that's what the way things are. They're the ones, they carry the burden of lifestyle disease or being in a metabolically quite unhealthy in the first place. And then if they get exposed to SARS-CoV-2, they have a higher risk of getting infected. And if they get an infection, they have a higher risk of getting really ill, and, you know, and then overwhelm the healthcare system. And, you know, also if the healthcare system is overwhelmed, if you have a disease of civilization, even if you don't have SARS, you know, or COVID-19, you can see some places in Italy, it's like they say, well, yeah, sure, you had a you know, thrombosis or a stroke. Unfortunately, we don't have capacity to help you, so we're just going to leave you to die, right? I mean, so if we had the bloody balls to do something about that, and it's going to take a concerted effort from individuals, I mean, from the public, from government, from the different political parties. We're going to have to stop some of their stupid, petty squabbling, and from the industry, you know, retail, producers of foods and so forth. You know, I mean, why not use this opportunity as a wake-up call and get our goddamn acts together?
And I think people are, now would be a good time, because not necessarily enough, but certainly people like you and me are discussing, if people were stronger, people were healthier, immunity was better.
Yeah,
they would take, you know, we still got the viral load hit, but they would take a better response to that, because they haven't got the weaknesses. We got nutrient deficiencies, but it is being talked about, and there's people like myself and you, and we're doing freebies, and I'm putting stuff out, and you're doing some education. So I think this could be an amazing time, literally worldwide, not the UK, not America, but worldwide, to create awareness. We need to be stronger and more resilient, because there's going to be a second phase and a third phase. There's going to be resurgence of this. You know, at least traditionally of many pandemics, freaking bubonic plague flares up every now and again. remote parts of the world. But now people move so much, it's going to come back our way again. So I think, you know, but like you said, it's going to take a strong character going, you know what? Because here in the UK, they've opened up KFCs for drive-ins, and it is mental. Now people queue hours for a nasty, greasy burger, and you just think, haven't you made any kind of, you know, understanding of the fact that we've been somewhat, or some people have been, because we do it anyway, but forced to buy fresh produce and cook, because the takeaways, okay, some are delivering, but a lot of them aren't open. There's a soft which we'll get to, but you know, don't you think that, you know, this is something you can continue, that your awareness has been raised through necessity? But people, I think sadly, people will revert back to kind, even more so, because there's going to be a massive surge in, oh, I need my junk food. And it might settle down again, but I'd love to think people might be more aware of taking a few extra nutrients and boosting, you know, the efficiency of their immune system. So it supports their health. And underlying issues like you've mentioned, hypertension, obesity, diabetes, a lot of these are, you know, manageable and if not preventable. I think it's interesting you say about Denmark. What's your view then on, because it's somebody we both know, and I've been in touch a little bit with Graham Jones in Sweden, how they've managed it? Because I take the view, like yourself, we should have, I mean, there's people still stepping off planes in Heathrow, and there is no temperature checks. There's no even suggestion of self-isolation, never mind being, as other countries are, putting them in motels to be isolated. I mean, my friend, if he gets back from Thailand, first thing he's going to do, he's with his friend. They're staying in a villa, there's 5 of them, but they live together in Glasgow. And he says he's staying there for 2-3 weeks before he even thinks about going to see his mother, who, you know, worried about it. And he says, I've got to be responsible. People here just aren't. In Sweden, you know, there's no lockdown. They're careful. They're more respectful, I think, of, you know, the distancing, physical distancing. But what's your views on why they don't seem to be getting hit as big?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some, because there's some things we don't know yet. But what the picture, with the knowledge we have now, seems that Sweden actually does have, you know, compared to Denmark, there are more deaths also, you know, the per capita population, but they haven't been swamped and overwhelmed. And, you know, that's because, so it might be that it's the right thing. Also, WHO now, initially you're like, Sweden, you're out of your minds, right? But now the WHO said, well, actually, this might be the way forward, because obviously containment, the boat sailed on that one, or the boat sunk on that one. So how are we going to find something that's acceptable? You know, because that's also, and it sounds a bit harsh or cruel, but we're going to have to find this balance between what do we do to prevent infection or death compared to what's the cost for personal liberty, financially, you know, for individuals, for private businesses, at national level, and so forth. And there's not any single right answers. There are a couple of things you can see that are apparently not the worst possible way to go about it, but it might very well be in the long run, and we might stand to be corrected, that maybe the Swedish approach was the right one to find this right balance. Because Sweden, they haven't, I mean, there's been restrictions and limitations, but not to the same point as other countries. And it seems one of the things that might also have helped in Sweden is that compared to the population size, Sweden is a very big country. So obviously in the major metropolitan areas, people have a lot of, you know, sort of interaction back and forth, but you might not have had as much interaction back and forth when you look at different parts of the country, like the Swedish population. If you look at the population density per square mile or square kilometer acre, it's really low. So there might also be something going on there where there's been some natural limit on movement, you know, but certainly, you know, that it might very well be that everything taken into consideration, that might be the right approach, and also the only one that's doable or bearable or to live with. You know, except like if you know, because obviously like in Taiwan and South Korea or Japan, they didn't really have to limit things that much because they were, you know, but they were ready because they already had the scare or the running of SARS, so they knew what they're dealing with. And what's also emerging, which I find is kind of interesting, is that I have friends who live in different parts of the African continent, so Ghana as an example, and they seem to be handling it very well. And you know, usually you'd sort of, you know, the usual narrative would be, oh, what a poor, you know, poor African country. and here we are, and we're highly technology, much better healthcare system. But they know how to handle things without shutting down the country. Obviously, because they've been forced to do so, because they've been dealing with some of these hemorrhagic fevers, so Ebola, Marburg, and so forth. And therefore, they know how to do things and do things that work practically with, where here's that, like, you have to learn on the fly in countries that never really dealt with things like that. So it might, I think, but I might be wrong, stand to be corrected, that the right approach is maybe less aggressive than what's been done in certain areas. And Denmark, maybe we have gone to find. On the other hand, we can see that compared to other countries, we do extremely well. Also, the sort of infection rate was a number. You have this number, how many other people will one person infect. We had that drop down to maybe 0.6 again. These numbers, there's some uncertainty because in Denmark, I think the problem is also we haven't tested enough people. Initially, we're too slow to also test people who are suspected, or healthcare workers in the front line had problems actually getting tested, which is like, if you dedicate yourself to standing there at a personal level, you should be, of course, have the possibility to find out if you've been infected. But also just because, well, if you're infected, you interact with others, so other patients, you interact with colleagues, and so forth. But also just overall, so I don't think, we don't have good enough numbers to have a true picture in Denmark of this, how many people have been infected, also many people have been silent carriers or just been slightly affected. I mean, then the other challenge we have with that is that obviously when you have a viral load, you can, from a swab and a PCR, you can get it, but you need probably a relatively high viral load, or sometimes you need to get a swab pretty deep. Although what's also emerging, that probably fecal PCR testing is good because people seem to shed in feces.
Nordic are doing their fecal, aren't they?
There's one, I think it's actually from the same lab that also has GI map. They have a stool SARS-CoV-2 PCR. But the other thing is that what we have these sort of, we have an unknown is in how many people have been infected, because it seems that not everyone produces antibodies.
Right.
So you might have people who actually been infected who don't have high antibody production. And I mean, obviously I haven't reviewed all the literature, but I try to keep up to date as well as I can. And there seems to be an age difference. So people who are older seem to produce more antibodies, both IgM whilst they're infected and IgG afterwards. Whereas when you look at people who are younger and toddlers and babies and children, they might actually, the number who are antibody positive post-infection or post-exposure is a whole lot lower. So again, I mean, the other thing is that at the moment, really, in the most reliable, but still not perfectly reliable tool we have to look at population level is to test antibodies and see, okay, how many people can we find who have, robust IgG levels, which suggests previous infection. But there might be people who don't produce IgG either, obviously, if their immune system isn't working very well, because that's another thing with, with immune responses, also with long-term immunity, or this whole debate about vaccines and so forth, right? I mean, one thing we know is whether to induce long-term immunity and adaptive immunity to be prepared for the next time round, whether that's because you get true exposure to disease or from a vaccination. If your immune system's piss poor in the first place, you're less likely to respond properly or be protected the next time around. So we have that thing going on, and then there might be this stage of life difference, which theoretically might explain why, why is it that it seems that toddlers and babies and children, even the ones who are confirmed have been infected, some of them also, were ill, don't seem to have as much, produce as many antibodies, or not as many are seropositive post. Is that maybe because, also you can see this thing that in general, children and babies and toddlers, they're less likely to get infected, there's a way lower percentage who get severely ill, although you get the occasional one. Is that because of how their immune system works, so they're somehow better adapted? Is it that their innate immunity is potent enough or strong enough to stop the enemy at first contact, so you don't need to get into prolonged fighting with a virus, and then to start up adaptive immunity with antibody production, have that kick in, because that seems to kick in week 2 or 3, at least when the patients have been followed in hospitals. That is not until then. So might it be also that youth, or biological youth, in terms of health, gives you a sufficiently strong innate immune system that when you get exposed, you're much more likely. It's like you just swat the bastard away first point of contact, and they don't come back. As opposed to you get into the trenches, and and then you have to move to the heavier weaponry or more advanced weaponry. But then you're also more likely to be ill for an extended period of time or get into a cytokine storm and things like that.
Yeah, well, the cytokine storm is a big thing talked about. So on that, and obviously there's big controversy with this, and you mentioned World Health Organization, and here in the UK, there's a lot of skepticism about the people who are giving us advice and making the policies. Their links with, vaccines and this, that, and other, and where the finances are coming from, and obviously multi-millionaire, billionaire names who are coming up, and everyone knows who that is. What's your thoughts on this herd immunity? Bear in mind everything you just said, which makes total sense, v. a vaccine. There's talks about, vaccine's going to take a year and a half, then all of a sudden, there's stuff coming out of Canada where it's nearly ready. They're talking about enforcing vaccines, otherwise you won't get free travel, you won't be allowed into school. So making it a mandatory, kind of almost martial law state that, you will get vaccinated or you will get, a criminal record almost, because obviously I've got two small children. It's a real kind of head spinner for a lot of people. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm also still a bit like put your head in a blender and turn it on, because I'm not really sure what to think. I mean, I think herd immunity on its own, whether that's acquired or if we try to induce herd immunity by vaccine or both, isn't going to be sufficient. We're going to have to do some limitation of exposure as well, right? But that can be done a lot more intelligently and with way more testing, contact tracing, isolation once you have suspicion until you confirm people are infected or carriers or not, and finding whoever they've been in touch with, But obviously, if we were to let herd immunity just run its course, that, I mean, I think one challenge of that is how many people would die in the process, the ones who are sufficiently weak. The other thing is, well, considering that we know that if you're in poor health, that alters immune function in all sorts of ways, and it seems to impair your ability to produce antibodies to give you adaptive immunity prepared for next time around. So we're saying that we want to, if that were to be the mainstay, to avail ourselves of a mechanism that's impaired in many people because of their physiological state. That would be the equivalent of saying, we will now teach everyone to meditate, except a quarter of the people we try to teach how to meditate have to sit in the mid of a motorway or freeway with cars. It's like, sure, fat chance, good luck with your meditation. You're like, maybe you'll get run over. It's not just that you won't be able to meditate or benefit from meditation, learn how to meditate, like a truck will just run you over. And that's why, I mean, I think at least one thing we can come back to is we bloody goddammit have to improve overall public health. And we have to find out how to increase health, especially for the part of the population who are not very healthy. And in some ways that might be easy for someone like you or me to say, because we work with health, we're into health, we're motivated, we're driven, we've been in an environment, or we've created an environment where being healthy is relatively easy, right? So for a lot of people who are not very healthy, it's not by choice. It's to a large extent a result of the environment they're in. Sure, if you're in a situation, you can theoretically, you can do something else, but so much of our behavior is environmentally driven. So I think no matter what, I think one of the things we have to is use this as a warning, as a wake-up call to improve public health, and especially to raise the bottom line. So in general statistics, averages, improve public health, but especially the people who are at the bottom third or rung or so, something like that. Find out whatever it takes to make them healthy, not just to manage the disease they have, but to help them ameliorate it or prevent them from getting there in the first place. Because I mean, with vaccines, as a concept, vaccines make a lot of sense, but you have to look at the individual vaccine and make sure it works and there are no side effects. And you could get into long discussions about, for individual vaccines, what's the safety profile like? And I think either side, both the ones like vaccines, you can as well stand in front of a truck and then shoot your head off. They're definitely wrong. And then the other camps are like, oh, everything's safe, there's not an issue. Like, well, okay, look at some of Peter Ogo and Christina Stable-Ben's research in the field in certain countries in Africa, where it's like, okay, depending on what you give, the sequence of things, and whether it's a live or attenuated vaccine, there might be effects that are not just disease specific, but overall health, mortality, or functioning. I mean, right now also there's research into whether the old live tuberculosis vaccine might actually be preventive for SARS, so it's CoV-2, because that seems to enhance overall general immunity. So and that's a theory. I mean, the question, I'm not sure if we can ever prove it, is, but why is there such a difference in death rate and in between Portugal and Spain that are in many ways similar right now? One thing might be Portugal maybe also faster to limit spread, but in Portugal, they kept on using the old, attenuated live tuberculosis vaccine for a lot longer. And that seems to be associated with an improvement in immune functioning across lifespan against multiple things. There are also emerging data showing that it might actually be protective against certain cancers. Wow. So there's right now there's actually, I'm not sure if the funding got through, but people have tried to do studies on what happens if we are to give healthcare workers frontline the old tuberculosis vaccine, even if they had the new one, and to see if that might actually lower infection rate when people are in the front line, where they're exposed to more, and also mortality, not just morbidity, but also mortality, because there's an overall improvement, of immune functioning, maybe also in relation to cancer. So I think rather than have this very black-white for or against for many things, usually when people tell you they have the absolute truth, run for the hills. Except of course what I say or you say, then whatever. If you listen to it, then you just listen. That's the absolute truth, and not But otherwise, when people when they speak in absolutes, well, look at where certain religions have taken, or certain practitioners of certain religions. We shouldn't blame religions in general, but certain people who interpret or excuse their behavior and what they do with religions, and they see the world in absolutes, and absolutes just very rarely work. Except I absolutely must kiss my girlfriend whenever I see her. But there's always an exception, right? But otherwise, So
hopefully with face masks on, though.
Yeah, no face mask, no. So that would be quite frustrating. So so I think at least one thing that we do know we can do is to improve general health.
Yeah, big time. And that's a big
population level, and people can start today with themselves. Sleep, movement, eat vegetables rather than chocolate bars, drink more water, less liquid sugar, drink more homemade sparkly green tea sweetened with a bit of honey instead of bubbly drinks with lots of alcohol. So there's choice you can make as an individual today, depending on your resources, your knowledge, and depending on what your starting point is. But we also have to start making changes at macro level, and that needs to come from everyone: the public, politicians, governments, opposition parties, and the whole industry, retail, food manufacturers, everyone. And that would benefit. That would not just be SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 specific. That's something we need overall. Because if we think back and say before, if we rewind 6 months before, and we didn't have this pandemic, and we discussed whether there's a pandemic or not around. If you were to look, it's like, okay, apparently we just accepted a state of affairs where 17,000 people every single year die in Denmark for something that technically is preventable. Yeah. I'm not sure what the numbers in the UK are.
The massive of coming together for the greater good, putting differences aside, and this is not the time for politics or religious differences or whatever. We are a one human race, and whereas I see pockets of that being respected, and that's why I'm going out. That's why I walked around this morning and getting beeps and cheers to see a smile on people's faces, and I see people coming back. Frontline key workers in nurses uniforms and stuff to put a smile on their face. But at the higher levels, do they have enough interest? Because at the moment, I think they're still thinking about, we've got to keep political power and we've got to be seen to put the other party down. It's like, really, what are you gaining now while people are dying?
Exactly.
The after effects will be for the next 20, 30, 100 years, people's health will be improving instead of degenerating.
Exactly. No, but I think that especially for healthcare, that's been and health policy, that's been an issue in politics. And also, it's easy for us to say because we're not directly involved in politics. So I'm sure it's a bit different when you're stuck in there. But it's like, too often I see, okay, you're not really thinking about true health or about what's really good for people. You're thinking about your political position.
Yeah.
And I become massively disappointed. Having said that, there are people say, Umahro, you should join a political party and become the one responsible for health. I'm like, hell no, I don't want to get involved in that. So obviously maybe I ought to put my money where my mouth is, but I'm not at the moment. I'm just going to keep on talking at least, and hopefully I can help affect change. I mean, but so with that, with what, So with what should we do, and different. I think definitely we need to limit exposure. We need to think about limiting transmission. One thing we can be sure of, because herd immunity is happening to some extent, whether we like it or not. Yeah. But if we want the most effect of having people becoming resilient, either that they handle better if they're exposed and infected, or they won't get infected again. Vaccines done properly can help do that. Herd immunity can do that. But one of the bases for getting the most effect out of that is that people are inherently healthy. I mean, we can see that from all sorts of trials on vaccines that are out there, and then people might think they're not, shouldn't be out there, whatever. But if you think about it, you can see studies that people who are metabolically unhealthy, they respond adversely to vaccines. Or we see there's some of these studies on the Wim Hof breathing method, right, where people who follow for, I think it's for 12 weeks, if they do the 2 to 4 rounds of breathing, 30 deep breaths in and out, static apneic hold as long as they can. Deep breath in, hold their breath for 15 seconds, repeat 2 to 4 times, and then short cold exposure every day. That changes immune functioning. So at least when people are challenged in those research studies with vaccines and also with microbial metabolites, that alters their immune response back towards something that's more balanced and better and more resilient. So irregardless of that, irregardless of what means we want to use to induce immunity, well, if basic health is not there, you're not going to get the response you're looking for. At least you'll be lacking part of the response you could get, which is a bloody shame.
Yeah, and it is for us kind of obvious, but this is the thing, it's getting that message out, isn't it? So that's why I want to do these, and what you've said, so articulate, but kind of just common sense at the same time. It's just we've got to stop writing the policies, doing the media. I mean, I don't watch the news. I don't watch TV. We watch the odd movie. I haven't read newspapers for years because it's just bombarding with bad news. But it'd be great if the mainstream media change their directive, instead of scaremongering and speculating, is to actually give decent advice, because there's freaking millions of us out there that could share what we consider basics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and interestingly, the WHO actually put out now under the COVID-19 section, there's a page about basic health. Move, don't drink too much alcohol, eat and drink less sugar, have your vegetables, berries, and fruits, have lots of them, have healthier fats, choose more seafood and shellfish. I mean, so the WHO, that for someone like us might sometimes think they're a bit conservative in terms of nutrition. I mean, they're saying, okay, part of what we need to do in this situation to improve general resiliency and lower death burden and how much this disease is going to have an impact is be healthy. So being healthy might not stop you from getting infected, but it definitely has an impact on what happens once you get infected for you, or what sort of burden that will impose upon the healthcare system.
So day to day, because I know what an amazing man you are and how in demand you are, how has it changed the dynamic of how you operate, and moving forward, how you will operate? Because you're like me, you like people, you want to interact, you're very social, the way you teach and lecture. So, whilst you traditionally have done more stuff over this kind of medium than I have, quite new for me. I mean, I can't see, people seem to think that's it, this virus is going to go away. I mean, the ignorance of that is this virus is not going away. It's not going to be 6 months and then we're all out to play and it's never coming back. That's not, the world has changed forever. How do you see your role, your business model? Because you've got the books, you've got the TV programs, obviously that's at a distance, but you also love being in the room. I love being in the room. How do you see your business model and the services that you offer changing over the next 6 months and the next 6 years?
Well, I mean, what happened is I actually still see as many, or I see more people one-to-one, but a lot of them digitally. So initially, when everything was totally shut down, and obviously me not being in the healthcare systems, like, you weren't allowed to meet physically. So I've moved on to doing a lot more video consults, whether that's Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, other platforms, or telemedicine. So I think that's emerging, tele-video medicine or healthcare. And now in Denmark, restrictions are so I can actually see people in the clinic. Obviously, we need to sanitize our hands, and we can't hug. So I've become very Indian. It's like namaste at a 1.5 meters distance, and and cough not into your hand and things like that. But so I also see patients one-to-one. So that hasn't really changed. And I actually see more people, because obviously more people also become concerned about their health. I mean, interesting. I've had, and I'm not going to mention any names because they get in trouble, but I've had Zoom sessions with frontline top-level doctors at the medical departments in Denmark, sometimes in between surgeries, or because they said, okay, I'm in the front line, I want to know what I can do individually with my diet, nutrition, and lifestyle to bolster immune resilience, and also just be able to cope when I'm put. If you're a doctor in the NHS, any country, you're pushed hard because it's a tough job, and obviously the systems often aren't really built to accommodate or be the most efficient. They might look good on paper, but they're not haven't been designed by people who truly know what's clinically happening. So I've had that as well. So from basically every single part Denmark, you have like regions that are a bit like, I think, healthcare trusts for different parts of the UK. I've had from every single region. I've had doctors, not just junior doctors, but people who sit there at the top of departments, consulting with them about that. So I mean, I had more than that than ever.
Interesting.
A lot of the lecture
that could filter as an influence, or whether they keep that to themselves, because like you said,
well, I can see it kind of little by little it trickles down and out, and then so that hasn't really changed, but more the interaction, telehealthcare, video healthcare. So I think for everyone and sometimes that's good, because for me it certainly means there are clients who now can see me, who don't have to travel a long way, so that's not going away, and that's not changing. And then for a lot of my lecturing, what's happened is obviously a lot of the teaching and things like that I do has been now also digital. I have this 6-month foundational health course for people who already work with health, to get them really well versed in the basics, sleep, basics of nutrition, exercise and movement, not to be a PT, but what exercise and movement does for health and stress and so forth. And so I run a course every 6 months, and I have about 30 students each class. So we had for the current class, we had the first session in February before things were closed down. Then in March, I had to live stream that. But what we did is we had, because in Denmark it's been that for crucial things you can gather, but no more than 10 people. So for that, in my usual lecturing room that I have, where I also have my office, I had 2 students in the room sitting at either end. At the very far end, we have this really long table we usually sit at, and then live streaming to the rest of my students. And then this time around, last weekend, there's me, and then my good friend Pia Norup, who's a GP who also works with functional medicine, who's also my co-host in the TV program, and so she's a co-lecturer in some of the parts of my education. So we were there, and then 8 students were there physically, and then the rest were with us by distance. And so so I think a lot more that's going to happen for me, and in general, and in some ways, that for the environment it might be good. I still really love the interaction. That's also why I said, okay, when I do these lectures or this teaching for some of my educational programs, if at least a few people can be physically with me in the room, then that's easier. And but I think there's going to be a lot more of that, not just within healthcare or within our business, which is the private part of healthcare or fitness and training, but overall. We can also see, I mean, for PTs and people, there's been a lot more training, personal training or small group sessions delivered online and with Zoom. So everyone sets their computer or smartphone or tablet up, and then someone lectures and inspires, and then they can look at what people do and change that. So so that's obviously changing, and in some ways that might be good because it means easier access, it's accessible for more people, you can deliver to more people, and sometimes the distractions or the sort of limitations that are placed by distance or the need for transportation and so forth have been taken out of the equation. And especially with, the environmental cost of transportation, that's so that might actually in some ways be good, and it's definitely going to stay, I think. And then all my public lectures were shut down, and I'll probably start doing public lectures again this fall, depending on how things go. But over this weekend, we're going to get, the next 4 stages of how Denmark will open up and what will be allowed. Yeah, right. So usually I would do, everywhere, anything from 1 to a couple of times a week, really big public lectures with 500 people, 1,000 people, and things like that. That's been shut down. So that's not been there, but that will start. And then I started doing some again, lectures to larger groups, but streamed online, both, closed lectures for companies, organizations, and I'm also looking with my small but very dedicated team if that's also a way forward to maybe start doing some lectures, that public health lectures, but where they're digital, to be able to reach people. But there's a lot to learn. How do you make that work? How do you have the same impact? Yeah. How to make people aware they're there? How to make enough people turn up and pay? Because there's a business and you need to pay.
Or monetize it.
You have staff and you rent and food and clothes and things like that. So so there's something. So there I'm learning, but certainly things are happening there. And then I think I mean in some ways health is more pertinent than ever before. So if you have something to deliver, if you have something to offer that's of value, you need to find out how you can reach people and help people with the limitations that are here. And sometimes we see limitations as an issue, but sometimes that also forces you to become really laser focused on what are you doing, why are you doing it, how you do it, how do you do it in the most effective way, how to make sure that you have impact. Not just that you send something out, but as much as you can control and modify things, what you send out is done in such a way that it changes people's lives, that it helps them change their behavior, perception, what they value enough that they do something different from before, because donuts will taste as good as they always have. Yeah. So you need to find a way for yourself or for someone else to help them, or you help someone to make broccoli more interesting than donuts, despite the facts that donuts taste damn good. Or like, I love white chocolate, but I know it shouldn't be in my house because I'll eat all of it. Like this, right. I mean, I love broccoli done properly, but but I found ways to, at least most of the time, to make sure that broccoli overall has higher value for me, or I'm more attracted to that than white chocolate, although white chocolate is still as attractive as it's ever been. So there's like, for us guys that now have reached an age where we might have a bit of wisdom, and it's like, I mean, I'm not sure alcohol is any less attractive than it used to be, but we drink less because there are other priorities, other things we find out actually give us greater pleasure. Right. And there might be some of the fact that the price to pay afterwards, the hangover, are either they're worse, or we're just old enough to understand how bad we feel. We're just, in our youth, we're stupid to the point like we were feeling equally bad, but we were like, I'm too dumb to understand what's really going on here, so I'll just have another beer or another tequila. I'm not sure. It's probably a combination of the two. So, but I certainly think that more things are going to be digital. I'm now already moving along that point. So right now I'm initially in a Danish version, but once we've got things working there, I'm doing international. I've created this, and they're still in development or in evolution, but Umahro Universe, which is like a digital place where people can go and get inspired about health and get tools and information and inspiration, sometimes a bit provocative to make people rethink, with recipes, with videos about cooking or health, and handouts and guides and programs people can follow. Right now, I mean, I was already doing that, but now it's just been accelerated because, first of all, I think health's more pertinent than ever. So I want to reach as many people as possible to be able to carry out my mission, but also just things have changed. I mean, but I think we're still, this live interaction, we need to cherish that, because if we think about mental health, you said you work with mental health as well. right? I mean,
Still
most of us are
human contact to me is essential.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
So I can appreciate
Exactly.
others good. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, so we need to find ways of doing that or maintaining that. Although sometimes part of it might be through new media, new avenues, new pathways, but that definitely needs to be there. Also, I mean, for healthcare, what I find is that to help people change, it's about information, but it's also about that connection.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you get the same feedback from many people is, it's not just what you said. I sort of knew those things. Maybe sometimes like a revelation. Oh, broccoli is better than donuts. At least you need to change the proportion or the amounts, the ratio. But it's also that there's this human connection. All of a sudden, there's a person who said it. They engaged with me. Maybe they provoked me, or they made me laugh and sort of get my armor down and take it in, rather than no, I don't want to deal with that. So for all us people who work with health and who have a mission to increase health or maintain health, then social human interaction is just as important, I think, as the information, the tools, the knowledge, the understanding. Because otherwise it just becomes like this theory that's disjointed from reality, or where it's engaged people's frontal lobe, but it's not in their heart and their soul, in which case it's very likely to just stay there as dead information, not tools that are being used in everyday life.
It's not a textbook that's being read to them or a script. I mean, the one thing I see in you that it still amazes me after 27 years of being in this, 20 odd years of teaching, and people go, oh, you're really passionate about this. And I'm like, why would I do it if I wasn't passionate? But that congruence comes.
Exactly, yeah.
But passion is something that opens people up to accepting it.
Yeah.
If you just state facts, like you see on the policies every night. I mean, we're stating things about what's going to happen when they open up. But when you see it with passion, I mean, in fact, in 35 minutes, give or take, we've got Winston Churchill's words from the end of World War II with the VE. But and any question about his character and his behaviour. But one thing that man had was passion, and great leaders and some very bad ones as well. But this is what leads people to change, hopefully for the greater good, is when they listen to somebody they believe in. And then every time I see you, sir, that's what you do for me. That's what you do for all of my students and stuff. So, fingers crossed things sort out so we can get you in the room. But how can we, myself, my students, potential clients, how can we contact you? What's your day-to-day with working with people? You mentioned there about the kind of Umahro University. You've got your 6-month mentoring, and then you've got your personal consultations and stuff. How do we reach you?
Well, I mean, the moment to reach me would be through some of my social media channels, Instagram.
If you send those to me, I'll make sure they get bang, bang, bang listed. So we'll get
Instagram,
website and stuff. We need to get those books in English. We need to get them translated. Get somebody onto it.
Well, as you know yourself, it's like you have all these things you want to do, and you do them as fast as you can. And despite having like almost boundless energy and enthusiasm, it's like, okay, you only have 24 hours a day, and you should be sleeping 7 to 8 of those. You should be spending at least half an hour or more moving. You should be spending at least 15 minutes of that time doing some sort of meditation or conscious silence or conscious de-stressing, not just sort of in front of Netflix going, but where you're calm but collected and present and focused on being calm and feeling that you're calm, right? You need some time. So that's it's there, and it's on the drawing board, and it will happen. But the things and all, because I had to do, and that's also been accelerated by this situation. But I was in the middle of a major change in my organization, my staff who's working with me, what competences I needed, what people I needed around me to help me excel and to sort of cover me or do well where I'm not very good. Because sure, I'm a big freaky savant, like when it comes to physiology and biochemistry and
it's exactly the
understanding
word,
it. And
I used for you yesterday, speaking to somebody, was it on an interview? And it says he's like this weird savant that is just amazing. Your brain is wired different to anybody I've ever met. I mean, I get some great compliments, but I'm like, wait till you see this guy. But I love your character as well. I mean, I said this to you when you came over the last few years, the difference in who you are, how you deliver, because your knowledge back in 2004 was outstanding. But now, I mean, you've just become this larger than life, and you're a big man anyway, but people come out of a weekend with you exhausted, exhilarated, motivated. And I just hope that you and I can get this across on, these webcams. And decent webcam and a mic, but it's us. I mean, I want to look in the eyes of people and see them going, shit, because then you've got their attention, then you've got them.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that's that, especially in these days, because there's so much information, things going on, so still that personal connection is needed, and I think that personal connection is so important for our health. And then, because it's just mental health. No, your mental health has immediate impact on what happens in your biochemistry. So I mean, there's like instantaneous reactions. You can within a short period of time start changing your production of inflammatory cytokines, things like that, just by being happy, smiling, in a place where you feel safe, trusted, or challenged, but in a good way, and supported, and people see you and are with you and accept you for who you are, compared to the opposite. So there's something with that connection that's really needed, and that's as important as the actual information, I think. Not just to get the information across, but it has merit on its own. But also then, so sure, but I'm a savant in those areas. Then for other things, I'm pretty useless. Like if you were to ask me to put up a painting or a picture, like you do some basic carpentry housework, don't. For that, I've got no opposing. I've got 17 thumbs, no opposing digits. I'm blindfolded, and I've taken way more LSD than what might facilitate some sort of mental consciousness expansion. So there are certain areas, like there's an uneven distribution of skills. Let's put it that way. There's some players where I excel really, and then in other areas it's just like totally useless. Back in the day, with Nordic, I actually was one of the founders of Nordic Clinic, which is one of the companies under the umbrella of Nordic Labs, and now there are Nordic clinics all over the world. And so literally when we built, we got the first location in Copenhagen, and I had to put up shelves. And I spent with someone else, and I spent a whole evening putting up shelves. And then the next morning, some of the other founders came in and they looked at them and said, Umahro, get the hell out of here. Don't ever come back. Don't touch nothing. And now we have to spend, about more time than you spend, because first we have to take down the shelves, and we have to plug the holes, cover that up nicely, and then we have to put them up properly. Don't you ever do anything like that again. So get back to doing some clinical, or do some more, some of our questionnaires or programs or things like that. But please stay away from anything that looks like, dealing with putting up shelves. I mean, no, I'm good for carrying heavy stuff. So like whenever someone, moves in my family to, they move from one location to another, they say, Umahro, you can come along, carry all the heavy stuff. And then actually I'm pretty good at putting together these, like when you have furniture, you have to assemble yourself from, say, IKEA. So that I'm good with, but everything else keep me away. If I were to paint a wall, you'd look at it and say, I'm not sure if we can fix this, or we just need to knock down the wall and rebuild the wall from scratch and then repaint it. So
that's good to know. I will never invite you to do some DIY. That's a good thing. Well, please get your contacts to me by any medium. I'm saying this to everybody, but yourself. The services you offer are outstanding, and as I said,
thank you.
You're a teacher to me and a mentor to me. So for the people that know me, they'll know that that's a very rare thing that I'm going to say.
Thank you.
Would love to be able to, kind of interact if the Umahro University takes off. I mean, I've got time on my hands, and I know I'm always going to learn. I mean, I'm more and more fussy over the years who I would, sit in a room or sit in front of a camera with. Because you get people that are just podcast junkies, and that's fine. But to me, I want to filter what I'm taking in. I'm getting to an age where the brain's maybe slowing a teeny bit, so I need to put good stuff in. And you, sir, are
exactly
good stuff. So thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. Get your contacts to me. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah.
One day we'll have that big man hug because you've got a good hug on you.
Yeah.
to you and yours, mate, and your good lady. Stay safe. Stay in touch, and I'll get this up straight away. So if you fire over whatever details, and then if you want to add to them, if you want to share this and get it out there, whatever you want to do, this is your material as well. On behalf of everybody that's been educated and helped by you worldwide, but certainly my students here in the UK of GB Fitness, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And it's been a pleasure, as always.
Tell you what, you have my permission, have a little bit of white chocolate. How's that?
No, don't get me started on my nemesis or my
I don't want
crack.
the FTO gene kicking off. Take care.
Because now, same to you. Take care. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.